Live from the Rob Christensen Radio Network Satellite Studio, it's Jim and Rob Overanalyze the Movies. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live stream show / podcast for movie lovers who love to talk about movies as much as they love watching them. Listen, if there's a movie you think we should take a look at, make sure you make a comment, say something in the chat, or make a comment in the comment section below, and Jim and I will have we'll chat and we'll see what we can do. All right, now tonight we are going to be looking at the true, let's put air quotes around that, true history of the Kelly gang. Kind of postmodern, very postmodern slice of life history of the notorious or heroic and misunderstood Kelly gang, Australian Kelly gang. So with that in mind, let's why don't we take a look at the trailer?
You die for your mommy.
Tell the truth.
You're a dancing monkey! Go on, do it!
A man cannot outrun his destiny.
Your mother sold you. £15 you cost me. And you can learn that back.
I were but a child, yet I were already travelling full tilt toward the man I would become.
The child assassin.
The butcher!
Is the man, the myth, the legend? What makes you think I won't kill you right now?
Sure not the man you pretend to be. I'd rather see to it that your kind suffer. Either side of that whore you call a mother.
Choice but to lock you up.
Your son intends to rescue you.
You good boy.
You go out there and be a big man.
Load up! 3, 2, 1.
You always want to build an army? Go to war.
Fire! You're bloody bulletproof, boys!
call me the coldest blooded murderer ever. But others, knowing the truth, would call me a hero. A man farewells this world. All he's got left is his story.
Yikes. This is the second time I've watched the trailer. Finished the movie like half an hour ago, and now I think I have a problem with the trailer too. But before we get into that, let's first start with our social, our ideological ingredients list. Does it pass the Bechdel test? No. Although this won't be the first time I've been corrected by you, our faithful viewers. So chime in on the chat or down in the description if you think I got that wrong. Will it earn a reframe stamp? Probably not. Is it class conscious? I am actually going to argue no, it isn't, but some may disagree with me. Is there any class analysis? If there is, it's simplistic and just fundamentally wrong. Again, some may disagree with me on that. And speaking of disagreeing with me, but I can tell you this, I bet you my co-host, the man with the most, Mr. Jim Chaboyko, would give a F-sharp about donuts. So let's welcome him here with a big round of applause. I was hoping for a big round of applause. Oh, well. I hope you're getting applause.
No, that came through. That came through.
Oh, it did? Oh, and it's just not coming through for me. Oh, because I had to press a button. Well, never mind then. You got your applause, Jim.
Very good.
Listen, everybody, before we get into it, Jim, once again, we have some of our regulars. I noticed that Shashank had to jet because he's got a term assignment due today. Shashank, for always, thank you so much for dropping in. And I would say good luck, but I don't think you need it. You're a hardworking young man, unlike myself, who's kind of slack and lazy. Any A I got was just through dumb luck. Who else do we got in the chat here? Ahmed made it. And big wave.
Hello.
And Richard. Oh, it looks like Richard and Katie. Awesome. And yeah, that's you know what? The applause. Richard, that applause clip was not a recording, but live from our place. Oh,
cheers!
And this is my live from my place to yours, Richard and Katie. All right. I think. What else do we got to say right away? Perhaps let everyone know they're in the spoiler zone.
Yeah.
Although I probably spoiled some. Boy, I wonder what Rob thinks. It doesn't sound positive. All right, Jim. You know what? Throw down, man.
Sure. Well,
what were your first? What's your first take on it?
I suspect. Well. I mean, usually we kind of, sort of disagree, or agree rather.
We'll find out.
More than we disagree.
Yeah.
And this may be an example of confirmation bias. I'm the one who selected this one. I loved it. I thought it was bonkers.
Oh, really?
I thought it was crazy. I thought it was visionary. I was absolutely, I think one of the little one-word quotes on the trailer was spellbound. I watched it until about 2:45 yesterday morning, and I was in it. I wasn't, I'm going to go to bed and watch the rest in the daytime. I was thoroughly just into it. I realize it's the true story. I think that's tongue in cheek, and that's Peter Carey as well.
Yeah.
The book did win the Booker Prize in 2001. So there's, in terms of bona fides, it wasn't just some airport book, but it actually was fairly well received. Movies are different. There are different.
It's super arty.
Oh yeah. But and the other thing that I was thinking of, and we'll get into the details, But once again, Australia, a country about the same size as Canada, takes something, whether you like it or not. This is like a high-end treatment of one of their myths. Again, whether you like it or not, it sort of added the rock and roll element. It had color. It had, again, whether you liked his vision or not, I thought it was pretty visionary. And I can't say that Canada has ever done the same. Can you imagine this kind of treatment for Louis Riel? I would go bonkers for that. But
I actually wrote that down, Louis Riel, because I think we have had that treatment of Louis Riel, and it caused not in a film, but what caused all the controversy over the statue was, and a lot of literary work came out at the time of the tortured soul, and we need to look at him differently, which. Now, there's huge differences here. Is that Riel, while he was wanted by the law, he wasn't an outlaw, and it wasn't the same kind of thing. And also, there's actually a Wikipedia entry for cultural depictions of Ned Kelly. He's been played by Heath Ledger. He's been played by Mick Jagger, and there's probably been a dozen movies over the years, and then Yahoo Serious did a movie about him. There's been painting, all kinds of cultural depictions of him, more so than Louis Riel, I think. But anyway, that's sort of getting out of it a bit. But yeah, I was really jazzed. I was looking at critics afterwards, which you probably shouldn't do if you're going into this. One person described it as a wild swing, and go for it. This is another thing too, just to set a little bit of context. This is a story that has a lot of well-known elements in Australia. There's there's the fact that he saved a life as a young kid, the armor, the taking an entire town hostage, the 2 years of being an outlaw, which they really just boiled down to the last half hour. The dresses, the poor Irish, immigrant upbringing, that kind of thing. So these are elements that Australians really, really already know. Yeah.
And so, as opposed to telling the same old story, I think that gave Kurzel, the director, room to sort of play with it. When you ask, why is any movie made? What's the hook? And it's, well, we're going to give this the rock and roll treatment. We're going to sort of just go out and go crazy and present it that way. So, I was really, what's the word? Kind of enchanted through the whole thing. I mean, their lives were kind of gross and unhappy, but for me, it made good entertainment.
Yeah. One of the things Katie said earlier had a Guy Ritchie veneer, and I there is that vibe. Well, we'll get into my thoughts on it in a second. And then Richard, you mentioned, he thought that it was a good contrast, Kelly versus Louis Riel. And I was going to ask you about that. There is a contrast here. Louis Riel was a political revolutionary.
Yeah.
This idea of the Robin Hood, which has always been kind of a something people have struggled, or let's say talked about a lot, is this a culture hero? Or is, and sometimes, you add these revolutionary aspects as part of the myth, or is a gang of criminals who once in a while did things because they kind of depended on, some public sympathy, and I was wondering what you thought about that, both about the actual myth of Kelly, and let's say the mythic aspects of Ned Kelly and his gang, and then the mythic aspects of Louis Riel, but any of these robber gangs, outlaws, what did you think about that myth part and how it was portrayed in the film?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that everybody in the movie was damaged, even the colonizers. So you had the Nicholas Hoult character, Fitzpatrick. I always get my Fitzes mixed up, but I think it was Fitzpatrick. He was obviously a sociopath or damaged in some way. So even the oppressors, I don't think were having
Charlie Hunnam's character was.
Oh yeah. You know, coming on to the mum during the dad's funeral. I mean, that's a move. But it's so myths are can be kind of dangerous. In this one, I don't think it's a coincidence that Ned Kelly is portrayed, I think anyway, as the most sympathetic character, almost. There might be a couple other characters that are treated this way, but he's shown, it's sort of shown that he's got promise, you know, in that he's curious and he's interested in the world, and maybe what's the phrase? I can't think of it now, but basically, in any other situation, he would turn out to be something else. The mother rejects him getting an education because she wants to keep him close, and then she basically sells him to the Harry Power character, right?
And an actual person in his.
Yes,
he did spend a year learning the bushranger trade.
Yeah,
by bushranger, thief.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
So
thief and bandit.
I mean, I sort of apply this, and you can see it down in the States these days, where a character like a person like that Kyle Rittenhouse is hailed as a hero by the right for having shot 2 protesters to death, and they're already mythologizing that guy. So myths you got to watch out for. Would these be people that I would say want to go camping with? that's my scale.
Well, I think that's would you?
No, I don't think so. No, I wouldn't be. You don't seem very organized, and you make a lot of bad decisions. But again, I'm cautious about the fact that Ned Kelly was the most sympathetic character of the bunch, really, and the sort of the most.
I was fine with
functional. What's that?
I was fine with him being sympathetic.
Yeah,
What did you think of, like, and maybe we'll just dump as far as I'm concerned, it was 40 minutes of unremitting child abuse.
Yeah.
And the entertainment value that comes with that, with another 85 minutes on top of that of abuse of another kind. Just everyone's awful. So by the end of it, you can see all the flourishes. I agree with you. It's a very stylistic movie. It has like a magical realist elements, like a lot of magical realist elements. It, the music was constantly dissonant, so we're supposed to feel uncomfortable the whole time. But I almost found it, I found it offensive. Although I want to rein in my sense of offense. I wouldn't mind hearing, from an actual cross-dresser, from a gay man or woman, kind of, does this speak to your experience? This kind of, and even, the way the mother is played as, and it's interesting, Kurzel, the director, one of his earlier pictures was Macbeth, another one where the woman is this, awful force, the mother as destroyer, and she, this Essie Davis, the spouse of Kurzel, plays this mother as destroyer thing, and after a while, it just left such a bad taste in my mouth. I was like, I want this to be over. It is, you're owned by it. Absolutely. It's this awful car wreck of awful human beings, but, dumping all that, in a way, it's so ridiculous, so over the top, such a big swing into postmodern BS. that maybe you can just kind of go, okay, well, let's just judge it a different way as a film. And yeah, as a film, it's well crafted. It's bizarre at times. I found its cruelty to everyone, just to a point where I'm like, I don't feel good about this. A bad taste in my mouth.
Now, perhaps, go ahead.
No, you. Go
Perhaps I should have warned you a little bit. Because I'd read the Peter Carey book. We were discussing about sort of cultural New Year's resolutions, and a couple of years ago I thought, well, I haven't read any Peter Carey, and I'd like to, and he's well thought of. I always hear his name. He's on Writers and Company. He seems well thought out. Anyway, so he was somebody that was on my list, and I read the book before I went to Australia last summer, and I remember reading it and really being, really enjoying about the first 100 pages. And then, and this, it's sort of unceasing, like poverty and oppression and everything that goes with it. And just the cruelty to one another. It's amazing, any of these people survive. But, and Ned Kelly ends up dying younger than his father, which is never a good sign. But so I was sort of primed for it, I guess, and I suspect that the color and the physicality and everything else that went with this, that sort of the vision that Justin Kurzel had, that sort of allayed for me some of that unremitting poverty and cruelty and that sort of thing. So in a way it's like a different, it's a treatment of the book. It's an interpretation that I found a little less overwhelming than the book.
Yeah. I'm terrified. Well, I'm not going to read the book.
Yeah.
What a miserable take, if it's even kind of like it. It's like, no. Move on, pick another one. What though? Let's talk about the film and again, Ned Kelly, the myth. There was a lot of other mythic things going on, but before I do that, I want to draw attention to Richard's. The camping test should be a new test we look at as a measure of character relatability. Richard, you're absolutely right. And a filmmaker, a Winnipeg filmmaker, Shaun Garrity, and I think the title is Zoe, has some people who failed the camping test in it. Another ugly, like even now it just has a stomach churning thing. A very well made film and a great beginning, middle, and end of a story. And this is one of those where I'm like, I can recognize it's a thing. Anyway, where the heck was I? Myth. Let's try and break some of these things down. There is a motif, a theme of, you're in a dead land at the beginning, and it's when he starts killing police and accepting the cross-dressing, and almost like a rite. Rites are done where they're screaming in the woods and they're looking up at the trees as opposed to the camera looking down through dead trees. These trees are alive. What do you think? What do you think the guy was trying to tell us there?
Well, that's a good point.
Oh, look at this. Katie's even like some of the visual components, dead trees, stark lighting in the dark woods.
There was a really good shot riding horses at night with almost like a helicopter light above it that I found pretty neat. And
a moonlight or like a vignette light following them along. Yeah. And then one of the opening shots was, I don't know if it was a drone or not, but it was above the horse and then it went alongside the horse. That was kind of cool. That's a good point. I was sort of trying to equate it to the passing of the seasons, because it seemed to go from almost this sort of like a fall, and then when Harry Power takes him into the Highlands, Victoria State has the highest, I think, elevations in mainland Australia, and it's their highest mountain.
is where their ski area is as well. And so there is snow there.
Okay. Yeah.
The Man from Snowy River.
That I bought. Yeah.
Yeah. So sort of goes from like a fall, a time where things die, to winter, which is a time where things just sort of are hibernating, and then it becomes spring as spring and summer as the movie goes on. For an Australian movie, nobody ever seemed warm. That's one thing that I noticed. I never got the sense of heat, even though there were barefoot.
Look at all
some of
the
the time.
lighting.
Yeah.
Look at all the lighting. It was very except when they're in the brothel, and even there you somehow felt cold. Partly because MacKay, the lead, played Ned Kelly. He is so lean, so almost. It's I bet you I was like, oh God, get that young man a sandwich. He is not healthy. And you ever read or watch anything about how these actors train for these roles, they do damage to their bodies. It's something that that young man 10 years from now he'd be going, it wasn't good for me. Katie, she brought up a comment. What I didn't like, guns being pointed at babies. Can we stop watching movies where babies are kidnapped or having guns pointed at them? Thanks, in all caps. By then I was, Katie, I'm with you on that. Although it is kind of hard to ensure that for you. But it's almost like this is what I had a tough time with, Jim. Yeah, the bad guys are cartoonishly evil. Of course he's gonna pull a gun on the kid. That's what villainy is. Richard.
We can combine the camping test and the baby test.
And the villainy test, the baby test. Yes.
That's not a baby I'd go camping with. Anyway. But that's a good point, Katie. What's our movie next week? Anyway,
we're gonna be okay on that one.
Okay.
We can assure everyone.
No, with that one, I mean, it's over the top, but Nicholas Hoult, his character's a crazy sociopath anyway. I was actually wondering about the propriety of that, or the screen rules, or sort of having a shouting match while a baby is crying. Like, you know more about the film industry than I do, Rob, but wouldn't there be sort of rules in place? And that gun would have to be a non-operative. If you're going to point it at a baby, it would have to be a solid gun with no moving parts or something, I would think.
That's a great question.
Not just a prop gun that shoots caps, but like one that can't, like a carving, or something like that.
A dummy gun. That's a great question, Jim. The last time I was actually aware of it was several years ago now, like somewhere in the teens. How good they were getting at, like in LA, at creating animatronic, like fake babies.
Oh, okay.
But we'd have to do some research. I wouldn't be surprised though. It depends on the rules in the jurisdiction they're in. But the armorer, who also, like on a film set, they also control the prop fake guns, because they're the ones who are responsible for safety in that area. I couldn't, that would something that'd be very well controlled. It's still kind of, and this is what I mean, Jim. Back to a kind of a problem I'm having with this film is it's so over the top for shock value. Well, at the same time, here we are thinking about, did that happen on set? Because that would be creepy on set. You'd be like, is there any other way? The Germans could somehow manage even bending a kid's bike below the frame.
Yeah.
Couldn't we have the gun pointed at the baby? Just listen, don't shoot her. The baby gets it.
Okay. Hold on. At this point, I'll give you a little more context here. Justin Kurzel, the director. So the last thing he did was a bit of a weird, for him, a weird one. Assassin's Creed with Jake Gyllenhaal. Before that,
another one with the weird relationship with the mother, the lead character in a terrible movie.
Yeah, I think that's...
But just a bad movie.
Yeah. Prior to that, it was Macbeth, who... And I didn't actually know that, Marion Cotillard as Lady Macbeth. I have to see that. But prior to that, it was... I believe it might have been like an independent Australian film called... I think it was called Snowtown. And it was basically the bodies and barrels case in Australia. And it was about a group of friends, or a social group in Adelaide, I believe it was. And they just started killing people in their social circle. There was actually a transvestite character. So this guy's, dealt with that subject before. But yeah, that was another kind of like a lot of hair grabbing conversations and a lot of intense whispered conversations, and that's another one that you should probably avoid. And it's true crime, but it's, as we've discussed before, it's that kind of lurid, sticky true crime, not
and stylized,
and not particularly just kind of like not these weren't master criminals. They were just a bunch of losers that started killing their friends, basically. And yeah, it's a sticky little movie. So I would avoid that one.
Squalid.
But this is So this is sort of right up this guy's alley, basically.
Well, and that's kind of like he seems to be, and he seems to be, Jim, as a director, sort of drawn to these kind of. And I can't even say these kind of stories. Like, I mean, but he's drawn to stories, and then that's what he brings to the table. Is and even that part of, again, it scrapes at my brain the way, it's one. Okay, let's give it. There's some redemption in there's some tenderness in the homosexual relationship between him and Joe. Like, you can see just some tenderness, which was like a little bit of a breather before let's go back to just but I found in a lot of ways a lot of what they're presenting is like, am I supposed to feel this is decadent? I don't think it is. And why is it being presented? Like, I mean, there's just this, even Nicholas Hoult once in the brothel, and he's all sweaty but looking oiled, like a decadent Roman of Caligula's era, like this is almost like that brothel's like a low-rank Caligula. Okay. Oh, Richard says he saw it. Okay, him and Katie saw it. Okay. We saw that Macbeth was hard to find, but well done. Very postmodern like this one. Though Richard thinks the Polanski 70s version is more up Richard's alley. Katie, I liked the Macbeth movie way better than the 71 Roman Polanski version, LOL. So, there we go. As we are differing, Richard and Katie differed on this. And Jelly Duck, yes, it is terrifying. Like, and at the same time, well, maybe terrifying, but also like a car wreck. You know it's happening to someone else. People that don't actually exist.
I should also say too, just sorry to cut you off there. Just one little thing is that they'd recently done this movie. I think in 2003 with you just brought up the Joe Byrne character, which made me think of this. The 2003 version where those two characters were played by Heath Ledger and Orlando Bloom, and that one was very much a. I took a look. I've seen it before, and I took a look at the trailer again just to remind myself. And it was a little bit of a haircut movie. Everyone's sort of coiffed within by about a team of 3 or 4, and everyone sort of looks great. And Naomi Watts is the young, rich, love interest, and she's always clean and pretty, and so it's quite a different treatment, and almost a sort of a paint by numbers kind of version. So again, that's maybe why I like this one so much, is because that one, the Heath Ledger one, was more of a point A to point B kind of thing, and this one was just strobe
Heroic.
lights. Yeah. But it was just strobe lights and rock music and just sort of craziness. This isn't the type of movie that always appeals to me, but what's that?
It's magical realist. I don't think rock and roll is the right word for it, actually. Although that's like a lot of the critics seem to have used that, this punk rock take, and it's like, at times those music cues were there, but it's very much set in its time. The language, like it's a pyramid piece that had some of this stuff. I think it more. Actually, I would think more. Not Bertolt Brecht. Definitely not Bertolt Brecht, but a kind of
that,
like this sort of experimental theater kind of vibe every now and then. Russian experimental film, even German, like in the way, like some expressionist aspects. And then a little bit at the end where you're kind of going, oh, that could be Pink Floyd The Wall. There's a little bit of these moments, but it all seemed to be set up to show him like he's a crazy person. Which is when I thought about Louis Riel and how there was a lot of post, like 100 years later. Now we'll get into how he was kind of crazy, Oh,
yeah.
I mean, it's like, well, maybe he was. What does that have to do with anything that he did politically? But that's just my own.
For the people that aren't from Canada in the stream, and Shawshank, if you watch it later, and Jelly Duck, and other people who may be watching that don't necessarily know, I'm basically sitting in the neighborhood that he lived in, and Louis Riel was a young man in the 19th century. He was a French citizen of Manitoba, and basically he was fighting the English, who were sort of taking over, or who had command of what was Canada then, and demanded to be treated well. And that was apparently, it's a long story, and I'll just give you the bare bones of it. But he was basically
president of the provisional government of Manitoba.
But he sort of became a little bit. And
he's
of a
not French.
fighter.
He was Métis.
What's that?
He was Métis. He's not French. Yeah. He was Métis. And
again,
for folks who aren't aware, Métis is and it gets even to a more specific definition, but a very mixed folks that when French fur traders came through what is now called Manitoba, the Red River Valley, they would intermarry with indigenous people of the area, and some settled here as farmers, hunters, and that's a gross oversimplification of a culture, and a fascinating part of how Manitoba and even Canada became Canada. And he was very much representing those interests as the Hudson's Bay Company, which owned the whole area, literally owned it like property, sold it to Canada, which stopped a couple 100 miles east of where Jim and I live now, here in Winnipeg, and to protect their rights, to make sure that their property rights, their way of life was protected. They first set up a provisional government, which stopped a number of things, and then what was it, 2 rebellions? And this is where the comparison to Ned Kelly, who's like more of a folk hero, versus Louis Riel, who actually was a political and military revolutionary.
No, you did a good job. I got tongue-tied even with the basic description of what he was. But
somebody had to start it, though, Jim. You started it, and I jumped in there. I got your back, buddy.
There's one really interesting thing which I think would make a good two-hander. He met with Ulysses S. Grant for a meeting in the White House one afternoon, which I think would be pretty fascinating to be in the fly on the wall there. But you know,
well, and this is, I mean, it's a tough one when you get so. Now, coming back to the movie we were talking about, is first of all, Katie. Apparently, her and Richard differ in their Macbeth preferences. She felt the Polanski version was cheesy. You know,
somebody's on the couch tonight. Just kidding.
Maybe rewatching one of these films they're referring to. What do you see that I don't get? What? It was funny. Even afterwards, I was like, kind of, a bit of a slander on someone's. Oh, for crying out! Like, the guy's been dead 140 years. He's not going to worry, you know. And I suspect there's not many actual descendants of. You know, we were going, oh my goodness, my Anna has been besmirched. Yeah. That said, yeah, like when you look at an actual historical figure like that and you look at it this way, you know, yeah, is there some responsibility on the filmmaker to... Yeah, I'm not even sure about my question there, but what do you feel about that question? Is it even a valid question?
In terms of how loosey-goosey you can sort of play with their lives a bit, I guess, or...
Yeah, well, especially when you're, like, near the end. He's just presented as just batshit.
Yeah.
Crazy. You know, mind you, you know, maybe that's a legitimate take on it. You know, we have seen this movie before, I think. Luc Besson made a more straight-ahead version, but still kind of looking at Joan of Arc like a crazy person.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You know, in The Messenger.
Yeah. Have I seen that? I think so. I'll have to...
It was not a good movie. This, you can say it was compelling. Absolutely. And actually, you know what? Let's come back to what do you think some of the themes were of this movie? What is Kurzel telling us with this thing?
Well, I think the most obvious one, I think, is what oppression and poverty do to people. But also, there's an element, I think, it's very much about colonialism. It hasn't done anybody there any favors. Clearly, I mean, they all seem broken. Whether or not that it was accurate, that's another thing entirely. The thing, and we've talked about this before, I saw one extra who I think was Aboriginal, and then there was a waiter that Russell Crowe's character speaks to, who's maybe half Aboriginal. He is, I think his name was Jack Charles, and he's been acting since the 70s in Australian films, an Aboriginal actor. But aside from that, there's I don't think there's anybody. In the book, they had Aboriginal trackers looking for the Kelly gang, and Aboriginal trackers they're like rangers, the ranger in Lord of the Rings. They were seen as almost supernatural in their abilities to track somebody down. Yeah. So there's a nice little section in the book about these Aboriginal trackers. Why they didn't have them, I don't know. You know, just even to give them some screen time. I sort of think sometimes with this kind of thing, where there's a movie about a young country and they're all sort of not doing very well. It sort of reminded me of the Maury Chaykin part of Dances with Wolves. Do these people even belong here? I mean, I think maybe and I'm totally reading into this is totally me, but the Aboriginal characters are conspicuous by their absence. They're maybe in a haunted land, which is and there was, I think, parallels to that. If you remember Kevin Costner, it's the last fort before the wilderness in Dances with Wolves. He goes and Maury Chaykin's clearly lost it, and as Kevin Costner's walking away from the fort, Maury Chaykin kills himself, and there's that kind of like, oh, that just nihilistic. Like, this guy's
Heart
done.
of Darkness kind of.
Yeah.
You're meeting Kurtz at the edge.
I mean, that last part was just my interpretation. I think it would be interesting to explore a little bit. That these people don't belong here, and this is how it affects them, amongst other things. But I just throw it, just spitballing. It's kind of an interesting idea.
Myself, the way I looked at the colonialism aspect, I found it just super simplistic. I'm Irish. The British have been screwing us. And I'm not saying that didn't happen. Absolutely, a long history. But just to kind of, there's the fact, and then let's look at these comically cruel representatives of the British in this forsaken land they're in, and especially as I was kind of doing my own little bit of research, and how there's the selector families and the squattocracy, and it didn't didn't talk about that, although I think the people of the time were very intimately aware of the forces that were acting on them. That it wasn't just, a bad constable and all constables are see you next Tuesdays, and so I thought ACAB,
all constables are bastards.
Yeah. And so I don't know if that's actually what he was really going for here, other than colonialism, and actually I think for an Australian filmmaker to take the indigenous people out of it to talk about colonialism is like, it's like, Canada's, and again, much like the Louis Riel to Canada comparison, to not talk about the indigenous experience, have it somewhere factored in, even if it's like, well, there used to be these folks and they're gone, and maybe to put an obvious pin in it, like to not talk about it at all, like I think that's a dangerous move, and also something where if an indigenous person said, you're just saying that now to cover for the fact that you never thought it was important. That's a reasonable criticism, eh? But I'm more so okay. So there's that, and you and I differ on that. Although at the same time, maybe like we differ on how it's delivered. What about though? Like there was the deal with feet and boots.
Yeah.
What's his name's character? His deformed his
bunions.
My God. It's like,
what's wrong with, I actually have that in my notes. What's wrong with Russell Crowe?
Well, and the theme of boots and step into these boots, and that theme of barefoot. Like he even took his boots off when he chased down that poor cop.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. When it gets so bad that you're going, oh, the poor cop. It's like, ooh. This is moved past a certain point, but there's these kind of themes around boots, themes around trees. I do like your seasonality. I like that analysis. It's if I ever watch this movie again, I don't see that happening, but I'm gonna pay more attention to that. But there is. There was other things going on in this movie that I think was way more.
Well, there was just sort of recalling it now. There's
angels,
all kinds of weird Oedipal things going on, and just the everyone was sort of, it was kind of incestuous a lot. There wasn't any kind of clear division.
Child
even of
molestation,
age,
if not hinted at, like
the love interest Mary, who was the female lead of Jojo Rabbit, which I didn't recognize right away.
Yeah, I had to read it. And then, oh, okay, yes.
I was like, where have I seen her before? Was she in Harry Potter? No, too old, too young. But anyway, there was certain things I think they were going for. There was physicality to the point of almost. There was notes of modern dance in it. I think there was a whole segment of where George MacKay's character, Ned Kelly, and Red Kelly were in strobe lights in the woods at night, sort of writhing.
When he was getting ready for the fight at the very beginning.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's not really a theme, but it's sort
the
of
beginning of the second act.
So in terms of theme, it's. I think there's aspects of survival there. I agree with you pointing out the whole the emphasis on boots and feet, and that might be a symbol of poverty, I think, in that case, or it also might be a connected to the earth kind of thing. If you've got no media between you and the earth, it didn't even seem to be seasonal. There's actually a great
character in a weird way.
There's a couple of neat comic moments in this, strangely enough, and when Russell Crowe's sort of like old and tired man, he tries to throw the boots on the wire there and totally misses.
Yes.
It's a little
As
bit of
part of his passage into a new life.
Yeah.
It's just no picking it up. No.
There's a few good moments here, like that. The testing out the armor so they shoot themselves in the head and stuff, and just oddly comic kind of moments. But I mean, I think there's a lot going on here, possibly too much, which is, I think, part of it, part of the vision.
How would you describe? And I'm not the way you describe a lot of. Did Black Klansman, did that other movie I can't stand. Help me out here.
The one that we watched recently, you mean?
No, the director who directed Black Klansman.
Spike Lee.
Thank you. Overstuffed.
Yes, yeah.
This is really stuffed with a lot.
Oh, there's tons going on.
Yeah.
It's almost like Kurzel thought to himself, and I sort of got the sense of this. Could be wrong. If I ever get my hands on that story, this is what I do with it. After walking out of the 2003 version, I was thinking,
and you're right. That's very much. Hurrah!
They should do this, and they should do that. And what about this? And if I did that, it would be like this. And I'd bring some rock and roll into it, and I'd dress them up like a lead singer, and there'd be fighting, and there'd be a horse walking through a brothel, and. But it's a little bit overstuffed, admittedly, but
I mean, at least it felt. At no time was it ever dissonant, except when I'm like, no, I'm supposed to feel uncomfortable here. Mm-hmm. Like the music cues were constantly like weird beats and everything. Another reason to bring up my one of my favorite music and sound, like music score YouTubers, Sideways. Mm-hmm. He talks a lot, and if I remember, I'll put a card up here to a thing where he talked about why are you uncomfortable here. That's because of this kind of music. It's a great like half an hour thing on just how music, dissonant music, can affect your feeling in a scene.
Yeah,
because this had it all over every music cue. It's just disturbing, just off.
I actually quite liked the score. Like I thought it was very atypical especially for a historical thing. Not just the rock and roll, and admittedly, that whole kind of calling it rock and roll, calling it punk, criticism-wise, perhaps a little bit lazy because they don't even on my part, but that energy doesn't sort of transfer through the whole thing. However, there are moments
not
of it.
Fury Road, where you really could say.
And they even dressed Ned Kelly up a little bit. He's got that sort of, jacket with the buttons and then the red sort of the red undershirt there. Yeah, and so then he's got a strut. So it's
a dandy.
Yeah.
Dandy, a dandy.
But he
Tristram Shandy.
He carries it
later.
I think he carries it well, and I think the one that played young Ned Kelly did a great job as well. Gets to swear at Russell Crowe. What does he say? He says, "I don't want your fucking pancakes."
Well, there's that break point, eh? Like it was a point. I think I wrote it down, in my notebook. I was like, "Oh well, we know what his problem is. He cannot." He goes back to his mom, and then he goes back again, after he comes back from jail. And it's like, oh yeah, you're doomed. Like she is eating you alive. you know.
With that, I think it's kind of interesting. Essie Davis is great. She was the lead in The Babadook.
Mm-hmm.
She also does her own, I guess there are they English cozies? She does Miss Fisher's Mysteries. Yeah, quite a different, a horse of a different color. She's got a cute little bob and is made up, and I think it's a period piece. I don't watch them, but her being Justin Kurzel's wife, she's not afraid to look. I mean, she looks windblown and dehydrated through the whole thing, and in that way. It's a bit of a Lady Macbeth. Speaking of Macbeth, it is it's funny too, because I thought that during the movie. Closest thing, probably a Lady Macbeth character, poisonous.
Oh yeah, she's the mother as destroyer.
Yeah.
A trope that's been around since at least Macbeth. But really, thousands of years. It's mothers, Man has mother issues. Film at 11.
Well, evidently all the old fairy tales were about, they weren't about stepmoms harming the kids. That was a relatively recent change to soften it up. It was had been largely about mothers themselves.
And I also think there was some things changing sociologically, like the getting remarried, and while a parent. Okay, I want to come back to Essie Davis and her performance.
Sure.
Before I forget, I wrote it down. I was like, now mind you, they did use light, and the scene was set pretty well. There's this brief break where it's like, hey, this could go in a different direction. It isn't, but we're given a bit of an oasis of normalcy when Powers, the bushranger, shows up, and he seduces her with his singing, and it's like, wow, it's just not, hey, give me what I want, or threat, or here's money. And I was like, wow, as rough as she is, she's alluring in that scene. When they're both, and it's like, as he's seducing her, she's seducing him. It was like, and it was like some normalcy,
Yeah.
Like, and it's one time after she has sex, and although some may be disturbed about that all in one room, most of human history,
Yeah.
Even late 18th century, there's still like primers that had fornication as a word you taught children because they knew what it was.
Yeah.
They needed a proper word for it. Because you're just forever in each other's business.
Yeah.
But the one part where she goes and she's hugging the boy, young Ned, where it's not gross, where it's not,
Yeah. No,
it's made gross later when it's like, yeah, sure, I'll take 15 pounds from my kid.
Yeah. Hope you like. If you're gonna watch this movie, hope you like the C word. There's another thing with children where you're sort of, when Russell Crowe had that little sing along about the,
all cops are bastards.
Yeah, and
Constable, see you next Tuesday.
Yes, using the C word quite liberally. And I thought, what are the rules for having children? Because they were singing along heartily, the little kids on the set. I thought, what are the rules here? But
well, first of all, that word, like Jim, we've watched enough foreign films. We've got to ditch some of the things we think are bad.
Yes.
The North American bad. And that doesn't mean, see you next Tuesday, here, there, everywhere.
Yeah.
In England, it's just not the.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's not. We have. And I suspect it's similar in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
It's
a little bit looser. Yeah.
Maybe I wouldn't call my mother that, but I call Buddy that. I've been calling that, and we went to school together. We've known each other 40 years. The silly see you next Tuesday. Yeah.
And my son, who lived down in Australia for a portion of last year, he said, that's the greeting.
So I the kids saying it on set, it's like, well, kids knew it before they got to set.
Yeah, that's true.
Again, maybe kind of like, some of our lower grade swear words. We don't want our kids saying it, but it's not stopping us from saying it in front of them. Well, that's for adults to say, What about, like, again, something else that, and this is for everyone, again, in the chatter, like the cross-dressing, it always seemed to be this kind of, like, implied, the character saying, look, I'm being a rebel by it. But I felt like it was being it was not being positively identified that way. There's forever innuendo about it.
Yeah.
But maybe that was me, how did you react to that?
I think,
first of all, I didn't know that it's actually part of the actual story. I came to this with only what most people might know about Ned Kelly until I was quickly scanning stuff to research this.
Yeah, I think it was a way to the way I took it, and I was trying to remember if it's even in the 2003 movie, but the way I saw it, it was a way to sort of get away. It was a disguise. And I think what Peter Carey did was he sort of elevated it to more of a behavior or maybe an excuse. The brother Dan, he seems to be fully buy into it. I sort of want to watch my language here, but he seems to fully accept it. To the point, I think he went to the wedding reception or the pre-wedding reception dressed in a dress, and he's got the long hair and the jewelry
Actually, that reminded me of Barry Lyndon, like a Kubrick Barry Lyndon, also Baz Luhrmann. There was so much going on in there. Again, though, not at no time did I go, wait, what?
Yeah. And in the brothel too, there were people of various persuasions. I didn't get a good look at everyone, but when he first took the dress back, and there was a fight with one of the characters who was rather angry. Yeah. So I think that was part of what Peter Carey. I don't know this 100%, but I think that's part of what Peter Carey, as writer, chose to elevate. To differentiate his telling from the rest of it. The book, I should say, is all written. It's almost like Train Spotting, like it's all written in the vernacular of the time. So it's written like in the form of that letter that basically he was writing. Yeah. So that's kind of one of the things that I thought was really quite brilliant until I found it kind of oppressive. But it's still a good book. Probably.
What did you think of So there's the scene, and this is where everything could have changed for Ned. And also to kind of hammer home, I think one of the overt themes, and maybe that's another reason why I didn't like it, like a smaller reason than the big ones, but there is a stated theme of destiny, you know, and how we're set on track for something. There's nothing we can do about it. Which is an interesting analysis. But it really is kind of hammered home when he saved that kid. The mother of that kid is like, I can change your life.
Yeah.
She comes to the house, and of course the thing the kid stole, the bit of jewelry, Essie Davis's ma is wearing it, and she shows it to kind of put paid on this woman's interest in saving her kid.
Yeah.
And it bothered me, like it's a nice move actually to kind of give yet another awful thing for the mother to do. But I thought it was it's the one part where I'm like well, of course she's not going to let the kid go. And this is in the mother's defense. I really mean this. It's like a family under that kind of stress. You can't let a 13-year-old just bugger off to boarding school. Like, I mean, that family won't make it.
Yeah.
You know, like especially not with her as the one running the show, but they won't make it. Like, you know, it's the, you know what? I could give your prize oxen a great education and a much better life. It's like, those fields aren't going to plow themselves, you know, you know, and, you know, there's, you know, the way she did it fit her Macbeth, Lady Macbeth. The woman did have a name, Lady Macbeth. What was her first name? Like, what was the woman's name?
It was something I just
know this.
It up here somewhere.
Yeah. Oh well. No, I'm talking about Lady Macbeth.
Oh, okay.
Like actual Lady Macbeth. Must add a name.
Katie,
Richard, if you guys are still following along, chime in. What was Lady Macbeth's actual
first name? Caitlin.
Her first name. Give her Caitlin.
Tulip.
Yeah, that was the only time actually. But what did you think of that? Like, I mean, really, that pair of scenes. He's obviously boosted the thing. Yeah. And you got to wait to find out if he put it back. He obviously didn't, even though he did get a sash that exists with his blood on it, which blows my mind.
Yeah. He kept it all his life, and you know, I don't know how long a lens the mother character had, because at some point she knows what's done with a young son. Either he seemed to be a useful kid, resourceful kid.
Oh yeah.
He stole the leg of the cow, you know, killed the cow, brought the leg home. Would she have known that she was going to sell him to Harry Power that far in advance? It sort of skirts over the time, this movie. The last half an hour basically is 2 years. Yeah. So it was a series of bank holdups. You can probably take a week and do a little bit of a trip between towns. Jerilderie, Euroa, a bunch of the others. Glen Rowan is where it ended for them. Yeah. But if you just look at a map or do a Google search, there's spots all over the northern part of Victoria, fairly close to where my son was living, and they're all the homestead still exists. It's still standing, like that crappy tin shack. He lived in several places, but it depends on how far in advance she was thinking. Like, was she really? I don't know that, you know, like a lot of people say with the current boss down south. They accuse him, they say, oh, he's playing 9-dimensional chess. And a lot of times other people are just saying, he just sort of changes his mind every hour. So I don't know which one to believe necessarily.
I think, I'm much like I'm not. Yeah, he's not a 9-dimensional chess player.
No.
She was not thinking in any way ahead. She was thinking about herself.
Yeah.
And actually, it's interesting that you bring up Trump. We can call them both horrible narcissists, consumers of others. That's what she was like. I mean, even at the very end, and she's saying, or not at the end, actually, well into the second act, moving to the third, where Mary comes to her to say, hey, you can help me save his life. Mary being the good mother, to her dad. You can help me save his life. One of the times when they failed the Bechdel test, because they're just talking about a guy. And she's, how you've done a good job as a parent is when what they're willing to do for you later. It's like, no, the bastard horse thief, American horse thief, is like, you're like this dog that just kept getting beaten, that loved you because once in a blue moon you didn't beat it. It's that sums it up. There you go. I don't think she was looking that far ahead. She just, no, that's mine. I'm not letting you take that. I suspect if she came and said, because you look at the, actually, okay, now this scene is making more sense to me even as we chat about it. She comes in and she's talking about the son. He saved my son. I can save yours. And don't you as a mother want to save your son? You could not be in this poverty. Someone could, and Ma Kelly doesn't give two shits about saving her son.
No.
She's thinking about herself, and I suspect if that woman came and said, I see a future for your boy, but you would be hard to be on your own. So let me tell you what I can do. If you would let me do this for your son, I'll take care of you, for 15 pounds or whatever, because forever, she's just the most selfish. It's almost like any dream of him getting away, they bring her in strictly to crush any thought of him getting away from his quote destiny, close quote.
And it's funny, the role that the United States plays, or the West Coast, San Francisco, is that there's a couple mentions that we can run away to the States, as that like people in the States go east. That's kind of an interesting reversal of that. The Australians going west to the very far west and I think they mentioned San Francisco specifically.
And talking about donuts.
Yeah.
And I wrote it down.
Yeah.
I don't give an F sharp about no donuts. It's like right there. Every Canadian's like,
yeah,
I was with you up to that point, Ned. Carving up the poor cop. Sure.
Yeah.
How dare you? Oh, and also the way the guy was describing a donut, I'm like, I've never had that donut. I want that donut.
Well, these are you guys who probably are used to hardtack, right? So that's or the Australian equivalent. So, I've been fiddling. I've been fiddling with this guy. I should hold this up for the entire time. I don't know.
Oh my goodness!
See, it's a fridge. It's a fridge magnet I bought at the old Australian jail of Ned Kelly with the helmet on. And that's sort of one of our.
Helmet and a gun.
And he's got a jacket over the suit of iron, if you can see. It's just rubber, but it's got
not wearing black lace. Is what you're saying.
It's my favorite fridge magnet, but anyhow.
Okay, what about you know what? Was there any part of it? I gotta admit, it's a different kind of. Although this one bothers me more, like just on a visceral level. it's I can see it as a good movie. As far as its craft goes, what stood out to you as far as oh, and Katie, just for those who might be listening to it in a podcast form later, Katie advised thinks it's just Lady Macbeth. She's a woman with no name in this take. Okay. Back to you, Jim. What was there any aspect of the film story, any aspect of it where you went, wow, that was that really makes it, or which is a really hard question with something this well crafted.
Yeah, I like the sense of I'm getting a sense of the director's devotion to a particular kind of physicality, and we've sort of discussed it a little bit here. It's a thing. It's sort of how he, having seen a couple of his movies, not all of them, but there's a certain thing that he's going for. So I sort of liked, and as I said before, there were aspects of, I think, dance and sort of almost like art installations and things like that. The lighting, the freaky lighting, these elements don't always work on me or work for me, but I sort of bought into it. Again, it's that confirmation bias. I thought I would like it, ergo I like it, But in terms of the handling of color, there were some great shots. I like the sense of place too. I genuinely felt they were filming in the proper locations. Like, I did a little bit of research on that, and it was all over Victoria State, but pretty close to where the events took place, and there was a real great sense of place. So the sort of the color / lighting, the sense of place. I really like the score. Like at no time was I ever sort of like thinking about my shopping list or anything like that. I was pretty engaged the whole way.
I'll give you my take on that, but first we got a question for you, Jim, from Katie. Jim, did your son mention anything about how Aussies perceive Ned Kelly?
Yeah, not so much. I think he was aware of him. My son lived about 50 yards from the Murray River, which is the border between, or maybe a block from the Murray River, which is the border between New South Wales and Victoria. And I found out later, I didn't know this, Harry Power, later on in his life, 10 years after Ned Kelly was hanged, fell in and drowned in the Murray River. I mean, you can't get more Australian than that. And that's
Canadian.
Yeah, if you got pushed in by a kangaroo and drowned, or an emu, maybe that would be more Australian. But anyway, so he didn't really comment on it. We were all together in Melbourne, and we all went to the Melbourne jail together, and spent the afternoon there. And you can basically, I was sort of talking to a guard or something, and I was standing. I was like, so where was he hanged? What was the spot that he was hanged? And it was right there where you are right now. And I looked up, and there's the sort of the scaffolding still. So those places are all still there. Incidentally, if you want to check out, I put about 5 or 6 pictures, including Ned Kelly's death mask, which I have in my phone, which I guess is a weird thing. I put them all on Instagram, my Instagram account. So if you want to check that out.
Fantastic. Well, let me put your there's Jim's handle on Instagram, folks. For those of you who are interested, go follow him. He is publicly available to follow.
But to follow up with that question, I don't know that he necessarily went there or was sort of. I mean, he's 23 now. I don't know how interested he is in history, that level of history in Australia. But it was just him and I at the New South Wales Museum of Art. And I mean, the bushranger, the notion of the bushranger is a pretty big one. You can probably actually draw a fairly straight line between Ned Kelly and something like, I don't know, the Road Warrior perhaps. But there's a picture by called Bailed Up. And Bailed Up was the old, stick 'em up, hold up. It's their language. And there's an artist who's sort of like a Tom Thompson. His name's Tom Robbins. And although I always get it wrong, so I should double check that. And there's a picture of a hold up right in their primary museum. So, it's all over the place. We commented on it. We talked about it as we were going through these places. He didn't really, he was more on the level where they talk a lot more about Aussie rules football than sort of 19th century history. It's a good question, but perhaps if he went there in a few years, he would have thought about it differently.
Listen, we want to say hi to Kaiser 886. Hello, sir. Great to see you here. Going back to actually a couple of things I wanted to also. Well, first of all, let's go back to what you're talking about with production design, the cinematography, and everything. I do. Everything was working towards a goal. Like the music's dissonant, so that when you see some of the imagery, it sets you up to be okay with it, because everything's uncomfortable, and sometimes the richness of the colors and the mutedness of the colors, because there's kind of a back and forth there. So well crafted a film. Even the storytelling, like the clear beginning, clear turning points, clear moments of, you get a few little break moments, and then you get some monster crushing moments, like great foreshadowing. So from that perspective, a fantastic. I thought everything really did work. And like I said, the only part that kind of took me out of it a little was the moment where she's, "You're not going to take my son from me," and all that chest thumpingness, I was like, even, and maybe it's more, I'm bothered by the cluelessness of the woman who's trying to, it's like, but maybe you are that disconnected. Like, it's just, in a way, it's a weird little scene that just doesn't fit the rest of the movie, maybe. Mm-hmm. Somebody's, this is important to talk about. Kaiser, it can't stay long. Just wanted to give us a reminder of how handsome we are. You're absolutely right.
I trimmed my beard for this.
See, you're absolutely right, Jim. You did trim your beard. Look at that. You
was getting
smooth, you semi-smooth shaven fellow.
A little bit too much there, probably. I was getting Russell Crowe like, so I decided to just ditch that.
Now, kicking over to performances, like, he was solid.
Yeah.
Like how everyone was kind of dangerous was, cool. Like, maybe.
Well, Charlie Hunnam playing sort of against type.
He was, Now, is it Hunnam? I've always pronounced it Hunnam.
Yeah, I'm not sure myself.
Okay. Right.
But Russell Crowe was good, and he seemed comfortable. Like, he seemed to sort of comfortably ease into that old man with the failing body, and even the singing. If you remember, he's performed here in Winnipeg. Didn't he perform at the concert hall with his band years ago? So,
sure,
he's a musician. Yeah.
You know what? Maybe somebody in the chat can actually confirm that for us.
He's actually got, a band name. I can't recall it right now, but he of course filmed one of his one of his first movies, I think, in the Brandon area, didn't he?
The first movie, like the Local Boys were the first people to bring him to he doesn't call it his first. I think it's one of those movies he doesn't want to acknowledge he was a part of. But it was his first appearance in a North American film, set in Gimli, because he was brought over because in World War II the region around Winnipeg was a huge training center for Commonwealth pilots. So Commonwealth and American pilots. Like, I mean, that was part of Canada's role in the larger World War II effort. It was a big training base for everybody and pilots around here. Now, I said Gimli, but I actually think it was around Portage la Prairie that most of that training was done. They might have shot a chunk of it around Gimli.
For the Moment, apparently, it was called.
Yes. And of course, he's the handsome Australian or New Zealander, whichever, who, falls in love with a local girl.
This is after he
basically
played a neo-Nazi in Romper Stomper, which was an Australian.
Which was his big.
Yeah, one of his first big ones.
His breakout.
Yeah.
As a crazy young man. It's something you said earlier. We've talked about this before. And I was kind of expecting a little more Wild West style in the action and everything. And I do think, that trailer, horribly misleading.
You think so? Yeah.
That's a shitty trailer because it's giving you an idea of a movie that you didn't see. We didn't see the movie that's promised in that trailer, but that's not why we're watching the film anyway.
Yeah. Most trailers are sort of like, some are more so than others, but yeah. No, I get it.
We're not going to compensate them, but we could compensate them.
Our Baker Street irregulars strike again.
Exactly. Richard chimes in. Crowe's band is called 30-Odd Foot of Grunts. His first gig in Canada with the band was in Winnipeg in 2003.
I think he owes us.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So it was the second time he was in the area in a first in his life.
Lightning strikes twice.
We touched him. Maybe we offended him.
Yeah.
Which is why he just doesn't acknowledge us.
That's true.
Okay, we've talked about this before. Thank you very much, Richard.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. If you have a bill, please send it to us as long as it doesn't involve cash or any real good.
And I didn't mean to compare you to a homeless British child, but anyway. Sorry.
Well, at least that homeless British child was happy as opposed to these miserable wretches we are dealing with in this film. You mentioned it earlier. We've talked about this. I thought it during the film, not in the context of our conversation, but I did think about it. I was like, kind of, boy, this feels like a Canadian film. It has, and it was the winter part where he's going on he's going to go become a man by being involved in, murderous crime. But up to that point, it all of a sudden, I'm like, we could make this movie.
Yes.
I mean, we won't, but we could. And maybe Quebec has. And we've not put the time in to go through Quebecois film.
I got one.
Okay.
I got one, and I was thinking about this. I was literally, I think I was washing my hands or something, or I was doing something totally disconnected.
It's ready. Oh.
Okay.
Oh, no, wow. That really kind of...
Oh, yeah.
It must be it's green enough that you're seeing.
Oh, my God. What magical thing is that? Oh, my gosh.
Anyway, enough screwing around. I have the Post-its ready.
It has been years since I've seen this movie, so I may be wrong. But I remember being impressed by it at the time. I think it's available on...
We're going to get a title, or?
Yes. Black Robe. And I think it was a fairly decent treatment of Canadian history. Correct me if I'm wrong. Lothair Bluteau, Sandrine Hoult, directed by Bruce Beresford.
Yep.
An Australian. But I think it was a dramatic treatment of Canadian history that didn't feel like homework.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
I don't know if it had the same flourish as this or the same energy. But in terms of, decent movies about about Canada. I think that was one. I need to rewatch that. So
Richard has chimed in. He'll take his pay in advertising credits. Wondering if I still have your logo here. Water bottle. Although that was actually a beer can, so no. I have something better though, Richard. I will hook you up. You know, it doesn't involve cash at all. It's my kind of contra sponsorship. This show in part sponsored by the research services of Lennon and Fowler. Okay, we can hook you up there, Richard. Yeah, I did. I felt like this could be a Canadian film, that there are these stories, and not necessarily treated like this one was. And I do think, though, that comes up to like, and this is way too big a conversation to have at this point, but maybe a bug in everyone's ear. For next week, looks like I'm giving out homework, Jim. Why do we think like Australia can generate quite a wide range of crazy film? Why does it feel like Canada does it? Because we're discounting Quebecois film. Like we're like it's not Canadian. What Canadian films we've had on the show, like, you know, I'm thinking Blood Quantum. You know, maybe we need more Canadian film on this. Maybe that's the homework. Instead of the why. Why does Australia do this so well and we don't? Maybe it's let's recommend some Canadian films, and maybe we should start bringing more Canadian film in our mix and reassess our opinion of Canadian film. We might not being fair. There you go. Never mind. There's no question there other than let's identify some Canadian film. Jim has Black Robe. Have you seen Hyena Road?
not yet, no.
Maybe that's something. You know what? And Richard, Katie, Kaiser 886. You know who you are. You know what? Shashank. Well, and actually, because we've had, you know, our German friends Mara and Janosch last week were asking about this after the show. You know, what Canadian films and what films in general we could recommend. So I think that's something we've perhaps not, you know, done as well as we could have.
They were asking us about exciting Canadian film, and I heard it was like, define exciting?
You're not coming to Canada for that. Oh, that's right, though. And then I was pitching Bon Cop, Bad Cop, and Richard was like, one of our loyal fans, was like, that's a terrible idea.
Then he ghosted you all week.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's re-examine our own land's film sometime soon in the new year, because Christmas is all booked up. Well, there's so much more, and this is the great thing about a film like this. It picked a lane and it's stuck to it.
Yeah.
It is so well made. And it's not, like, I can't fault the film for its craft, not for its storytelling craft, not for, it's just very well done by people who really know what they're doing and committed. You're right. What did you say earlier, Jim? A big swing. Absolutely.
Big swing, yeah.
I think a big swing into foul right field. But big swing. Before we get into final thoughts, though, things we still haven't talked about, Jim, I think it is time to maybe talk about next week and what our film is as we kind of kick off Christmas. Do you want to? What are we looking at next week, Jim?
Our Christmas season begins. Has been a topic of great conversation between Rob and I. Does it still hold up? We're watching Die Hard with Bruce Willis.
That's right, folks.
Heading to Nakatomi Plaza.
And the classic.
Yes.
And not once is a baby kidnapped or threatened with a gun. So, Katie, don't you worry. This one passes the baby test.
The director's cut with the baby scene, with the daycare scene.
The late night party daycare.
I'm Hans Gruber. Yeah, it's just standing in my, surrounded by children.
Not paying attention, screaming at the top of the lungs. Not because of the threat, but because, well, they're kids. That's what children do. All right. On that, another thing, folks, Jim and I, and it will come out tomorrow. I've got it scheduled to be released tomorrow at 8 a.m. But Jim and I, last night, we actually recorded our first cinema. We're calling it Cinema Sidebar. And it's kind of a news and views stuff, like the sidebar stuff that we can't really even connect it to the movie in any reasonable way. You know, a bit of news, a lot of views, a lot of hot takes. Anyway, that'll be coming out. So once again, I'm going to beg you for the like, beg you for a subscription, and so that you don't miss that new show coming out, what do?
Back and forth.
That's an investment. What a great investment, Jim.
I know. I'm still stoked about it. It's like effects, production values.
Exactly. All right, Jim. Last thoughts.
Not for everyone. I wouldn't want to watch this with my mother. She wouldn't have liked it anyway. I dug it. Maybe it's a good late night movie. Again, confirmation bias, I think, is playing a role, but this may not have been a movie that would have appealed to me 5 years ago, but for some reason the elements came together, and for me it worked, and I was able to sort of compartmentalize. That's something that some people do, but I was able to compartmentalize the horrible characters enough that I could enjoy, as Rob's pointing out, the craft of the movie. But it's fun. It's a different treatment, and it certainly isn't a homework movie. That's sort of what I took away from it. So, and I have to watch this guy's Macbeth. That looks bonkers. How about you?
You know what? I'm gonna say I think the only way I could recommend this as something to watch is, you're doing something for film studies or an English course, and you're like, okay, here's a way you can get a little crazy about something, or you want to say, or if I was in that class, it's like, here's a really great film I detest. And detest, actually, that's too strong, Jim. I think if somebody was saying I'm really into bonkers, then I could say, oh yeah, you give this a shot. Yeah. You may not like it, and if you come away horrified, well, that's on you, buddy. Yeah. I was horrified. You're the one saying you like bonkers. Yeah. I found it just in its that. Yeah, again, 40 minutes of child abuse. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, this just takes me out of I just feel so depressed and so crushed. And again, a thing determinism, fate, there's a lot of stuff going on there. Yeah. But this kind of storytelling fate, this idea of destiny, there's no acceptance of random chance, and the one bit of random chance where he could have gone differently is just crushed outright. Without taking into it, without even discussing larger social pressures. I find it just bothers me immensely. It's like there's no redeeming value to any of the characters. No characters redeemed. Even the guy who escaped got away warn the police before the train was derailed and what would have been a horrific loss of life. He's presented as just a grade 8 all at the end.
Yeah.
And even that, it's like, even that just, that actually, of all the scenes, I was like, oh, this is a little much.
Filmed at the Victoria State Library in Melbourne.
Beautiful room. Very, very imperial. And I do think, Jim, the one thing, I think the biggest criticism of the film beyond that is, Australian history and colonialism and not one Indigenous person to be seen, or a couple barely characters. That's a little much. And again, it'd be like us delving deep into our Canadian history and then kind of going, well, actually, you know what? The Rob Ford movie, I think we called it out saying, it's like, okay, you had a lot of color, there were, it reflected the multicultural, the cosmopolitan aspect of Toronto. But again, it's like a pretty big Canadian city and no Indigenous people involved in politics. Are we sure about that?
So, no, it's,
I think that, but those are, relatively speaking, to core to my biggest objection about this film is that just unremitting awfulness to these people, while at the same time kind of showing how solid a movie it is, how really well made a movie is, because I cared about them all. I mean, that poor young cop, and all cops are bastards.
Definitely not for everyone. That's what I should add. But also, I'm not immune to that kind of thing either. I mean, I remember in terms of laying it on thick, something like Pan's Labyrinth, where the sort of the evil soldier,
the fascist,
is stitching up his arm for 20 minutes. It's like, in front of the little girl, and it's just like, I, as much as I like Guillermo del Toro, it's just like, I get it. I felt the same way about movies, certain movies myself, where the cruelty and the sort of the torture, goes on and on and on. And I think we've talked about it. I've expressed it. It's just when this one doesn't really have antagonists and protagonists. It's just that everyone's kind of both, so in terms of that, but it's, again, I'm normally fairly sensitive about those things, but there's something about the telling of it that I think I found quite interesting.
Part of it is, I think, one of the things in the film's favor. Like, at first I want to say, my feelings on that is not a judgment on your feelings. On the film.
No. I get that.
That's one of the things I think that works in this film, which is really surprising. One of the things that I found very impressive was I never at any time did it feel like it was fetishizing something. Even MacKay's body, like, where we see it constantly. Like, I mean, the thing that, again, it would be a great film studies discussion piece. Like, I got to admit, I'd love to be in a class to hear, what everyone, but just the thing about the body, but I didn't feel like it was fetishized. Although, actually, going back to something how everyone's just filthy, which is kind of what I expected. You can see it in the trailer, and as you're getting
it's Australia.
Well, anything about the that time frame, we just assume now filth. That we've been seeing. It's no longer haircut movies. We see filth. Except Mary, mother of a fatherless child. Was like, can't say it was on the nose though, because it's only now that I'm like, oh, wait a second. Mary, mother of a fatherless child. She's the only clean person in the whole flick. Clean. Hoult's character's oily. All the rich people watching the UFC fight get blood spattered on them, right? There's blood on them. There's a metaphor for you. But she's the only one who's always clean. And even in the cloak and the big hood thing she rolls in with to talk to Lady Macbeth, you know, she's clean, and that thing could be almost biblical. Yeah, another way you could maybe read the film. You could certainly read that character as a Bible character, you know, a biblical Mary, you know, not Mary. Well, and a bit of Mary Magdalene, like the redeemed whore, you know.
Definitely.
But,
her name's Mary. I mean, that's a little on the nose.
But yeah, Mary. Like, I mean, Mary with the fatherless child, and she's clean though. Even when we see her nude, and not. I didn't find her, again, I didn't see the male gaze in that shot. It mostly just, wow, she's clean. Everyone else is so filthy or oily or scarred.
Yeah.
You know.
And I don't think you ever see her outside. I think she's an indoor character. I'm just trying to recall. I might be wrong.
Except in the hut.
Yeah.
In their shitty little shack, which is basically outdoors for all intents and purposes.
That's true.
Okay.
The painter I should just mention is Tom Roberts, the one who did Bailed Up. And Bailed Up, actually, the painting itself has its own Wikipedia page. So if you want to check that out.
Let's see if we can't bring it up quickly for our
sure.
Tom Roberts Bailed Up. Okay, folks, let's see if we can't hook you up here. Wow. In the Art Gallery in New South Wales. Just a sec, folks.
So as part of the tradition, it's one of the neat things about going down there is that, you know, they have their, not necessarily group of 7, but they have their group of, is it group of 7? Yeah. They have their own, you know, Grace Cossington Smith and Tom Roberts and a number of others. And this is sort of a famous one of the time and hanging very proudly in downtown Sydney. So.
Oh, well, and look at that. If we got their app, we could project it in our room.
Ah,
I'm
very
not
cool.
Get that out of the way with the, But there you go, folks.
Yeah.
There's Bailed Up, which is kind of a lot less violent.
Yes.
You know, almost pastoral vision of, you know, a violent crime out in the woods. Oh, excuse me. All right. Listen, folks, I think it's time, like, a very well-made film, which allows you to, it gives you something to chew on, right?
Yeah.
So I can give it that, even as I'm like, you know, still got, no, not do that again.
Next week, the Nightingale. Just kidding.
Yeah. Oh, Jim, I did think of that, and all I can say is, that won't be coming up on our radar for a while. You know.
I suspect it's kind of similar.
Yeah. I don't need to see any more Australian misery for a bit.
Yeah.
All right. Listen, folks. Next week it'll be 9:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. UTC offset, and I want to say we're still -5 actually.
Okay.
But let me see that. Oh, we are now, my apologies. So I've been giving out bad advice. We are -6 UTC offset now. So for Shashank and now, mind you, you know what? The internet takes care of all that as long as I get my posting time right. But for those who are planning ahead, it's 9:30 p.m. Central Standard Time here in North America. UTC offset -6 for those. For our wonderful participants, or wonderful audience members in the larger world that we're very fortunate to have.
Yes.
So on that, you know what? Richard, Katie, thank you so much. And thanks for, being part of that research team and chiming in here. Kaiser 886, thanks for dropping by. Even if it's just to stroke our ego and lie to us. I'm okay with that kind of lie. You know what? We are handsome fellers. You know what? Jelly Duck, Ahmed, thanks for dropping by. You know what? Really appreciate when you come in. And yes, this film is, to a certain degree, kind of terrifying. Shashank, thank you so much for dropping in. And I know you always catch up because you always chime in with some insight, whether it be Facebook Messenger or on in the description below. And thank you very much for that. Jim, you got any have I missed anyone, Jim? You got any other shout outs?
We had a couple silent people maybe looking in, but no, if we've missed you, forgive us. Come back and watch Die Hard, and we'll talk about it next week.
Yes. So yeah, watch Die Hard, then come join us next Sunday or Monday, depending on where you are in on this wonderful globe. Anyway, I'm going to. I think it's Jim. I think it's that time. I'm going to bring down the music, and I am going to.
Me and Ned say goodbye.
Yep. Time to cue the outro.
I've been in your world.